Good evening, everyone. May I welcome you tonight? Just to let you know that we've asked for the air conditioning to be turned off because of the noise, but if it gets too hot, we'll turn it back on again. May I ask everyone to talk into the microphone? We're being a webcast tonight, like usual. And I suppose I would also like to welcome a new member, Dave Wilcox. He's replacing David Jacobs. But I think everyone else is the same, really. Anyway, if I could start with the first item on the agenda. We are to appoint the vice chairman for 24-25. So does anyone have any nominations for the appointment of vice chairman? Councillor Nichols.
Can I propose Councillor David Walkham for Vice Chair?
Thank you. And a seconder? Oh, yes, Councillor Williamson. So please, can we have a show of hands to indicate whether you support the appointment of Councillor Walkham as vice chairman? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. That is carried. So, welcome again, David. So apologies for absence tonight.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you very much. So third item, the minutes for the meeting 30th of January. So before us, we have the minutes of the meeting held on 30th of January 24. Are members content for me as chairman to sign these minutes? And I'm after a proposer. Councillor Nichols?
I'll propose that they're a true record.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Walkham. Thank you. So can I please have a show of hands to indicate whether you support the motion for me as councillor to sign the minutes? Those in favour? And those against? And abstaining? Yes, Councillor Wilcox, thank you. So that is carried. So I've got no announcements tonight, so we're going to save a few minutes there. But as I say, Councillor Wilcox has joined us. And so I hope you enjoy your year, if not more. So, thank you. And declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest regarding tonight's agenda? No, that's good. Thank you very much. And now, training session. The shared anti-fraud service. We have tonight a 15-minute talk, hopefully. So, is it you, Philip? Philip, yeah.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Just do a couple of introductions for myself and my colleague. I'm Darren Bowler. I'm a counter fraud manager at the Shared Anti-Fraud Service, those that I've not met before. And my colleague here is Phil Newhouse. Phil is our Senior Fraud Prevention Officer. He's been with the SAF since 2016, so very soon after it was set up. He's previously held the roles of fraud investigator and senior fraud investigator, and he's currently supporting the SAPS management team on a number of projects. And one of those is leading on the partner engagement at East Hearts, which is one of the reasons why he's here this evening. He's also going to support me with some training, which we're about to embark on. I promise it is only 15 minutes. We've been asked to include an expansion of the synopsis that appears in your report in relation to one particular case. When that's concluded, Phil's going to take over and spend a few minutes talking about the role of AI, artificial intelligence, in fraud, which is a very hot topic. So we thought we might do some myth busting and some explanation so we can ensure that you sleep well tonight and not have to worry about AI too much. The case that,
So, sorry, Darren, are you using the microphone?
yes,
Oh, sorry.
it's
yeah.
on, sorry, it's not close enough. The case that we've been asked to speak about is one that was concluded just towards the end of the last financial year. The case ended at court in respect of some planning legislation, but that's not really how it started. So I'm going to take you back to the beginning of this particular case, which relates to a property development in a small, which is a small residential collection of 12 homes. And it's on a farm just not very far from here in an exceptionally rural location. The development was subject to 2 relevant planning applications, and it's a second application to which the investigation and the subsequent offences that were prosecuted relate to. The first planning application established the property and it was granted for a mixed use type of development, which is known as live work. That's an unusual development, but not an uncommon type of development, especially in rural locations. And it was at the time in line with the council's plan. One of the objectives being that every journey from a house shouldn't start and end with a car. And so basically there were 6 units that were to be used as residential and 6 units used as a business premises. But they were to be both occupied by the same residents. So they lived in one area, worked in the other, hence the name Live Work. Planning Permission specified a floor area split of 70 and 30% respectively for each pair. So whatever the total floor space was going to be, the greater area was going to be the home and the smaller area was going to be the work area. Sometime after its construction and habitation, the second application was received, and that was from Mr. Ashley, whose farm the development was constructed on, and who built the development. And this was for a change of use from business to residential, and that related to the 6 smaller business units. So planning officer from the planning team here duly attended to assess the change of use application on site and found that the 6 business units were already in occupation as residential. And in his view, they'd always been that way. The businesses were registered for, at these addresses, were registered for business rates in the names of the occupants on the national non-domestic rate records held by the council here. However, the business activity was really insufficient and possibly insignificant for the purposes of the property to be classed as in use for business occupation. The case was referred to us for an investigation in relation to council tax and business rates. We made inquiries with both the council tax and business rates teams and brought them together, and we basically identified what we were expecting to see: 6 residential habitations, 6 businesses, and the appropriate council tax and business rates being applied in both cases. The businesses were so small that they were excluded under the small business clause, so they didn't actually pay any rates at all, nor did they pay any council tax, despite the fact that they'd been in residential occupation. And that wasn't obvious to both of the teams. Due to their operational separation, the residential and business occupants were not identified as being the same people, which is what the original planning application requested or mandated it should be. As we started to examine what we had and what offences were coming to light, it was quite clear that actually there were no offences under the council tax legislation. Despite, which seems perverse with what I'm about to tell you, that instantly that they were found to be in habitation and not sufficient for a business rates claim, the business rates was removed and they were put back into council tax, despite the fact that they shouldn't be residing in as a residential property. There is a jar with planning legislation and council tax that can be applied. Where someone was living, council tax was applied to the counts, and the value of the new levy was completely recovered for all of those 6 units for the period of their use as residential. So we're left with a situation where we have no council tax offences and no offences under the business rates for a number of reasons. So we continue to gather the evidence from the occupants about what had gone on at the property to see where that took us. One of the residents was quite happy to talk to us and stated in evidence that he'd not completed one of those business rates forms that had been submitted to the council to exempt it from business rates as a small business and show that it was complying with the original planning permission. And when we showed to him a tenancy agreement, which was submitted with the change of use planning application, it was quite clear that that wasn't his signature, and he'd never actually been given a tenancy agreement for his residential period in the business unit. And there are other issues with the tenancy agreements for the other business units as well. And none of them had completed the business rates forms either. So they're effectively in their council tax free until it was retrospectively applied. And those false documents relate to the offences which the defendant, Mr. Ashley, pleaded guilty for when he was at court. Having pleaded guilty, there were some aggravating circumstances around this particular offending, which meant that the magistrate didn't have sufficient powers to appropriately deal with Mr. Ashley in the magistrates' court, and so he was sent for his sentence to the Crown Courts in Albans. The details of the full sentence are in this evening's report. One of the outcomes was that the costs were completely recovered for the council's prosecution, and that's £44,000 just over. So the prosecution has been, the cost of the legal fees has been dealt with, and this case is actually a very good example, although it identifies some areas that weren't identified at the time because there weren't systems and processes in place to do that. Those systems and processes are now in place with the business rates team and the council tax team and the planning team. But in bringing this prosecution together, there was a lot of work done here at the council, and whilst we are here tonight talking to you about it, the gratitude from us goes to the council tax teams, the business rates team, the planning department, and of course the legal team, who without whom that prosecution couldn't have been possible. Those internal processes that I mentioned have been tightened up, and the planning team are still, I understand, dealing with the issues of the original application that are extent. So some things were identified as going wrong. They've been put right. The issues in relation to trying to convince the council that one situation was actually another were seen for what they were, and the case was appropriately prosecuted. And that sends a valuable deterrent message, I think. We have recently had another planning case, but very, very minor, and we've done an investigation and followed that up as well. So not only is a deterrent out there because that's an anomaly, that one case, but we are getting the referrals in from the planning team and wherever these things are happening as well now, which is good news. So we can get on and deal with them as they arise. So I'm going to hand you to Phil now, who's going to pick up AI.
Thank you, Darren. Yes, so we're going to have a quick discussion, a brief run through of the emerging risks and threats that SAFs have identified over the last 12 months. This is done through scanning the landscape and trying to keep ahead of the curve, trying to keep our councils, our partners ahead of that curve, which is a vital part of effective counter-fraud response. Using local intelligence, national intelligence, SAFs better understands the fraud threats, enabling us to advise and protect our council partners against these risks. So the report that will follow from SAFs will discuss the work we've been doing in the last 12 months. We thought we'd take this opportunity to discuss them in a little bit more detail and give you a little bit of background to a couple of threats which we've reported to the council on. So first of all, artificial intelligence, or AI, as it's referred to. You can't help but have heard about the rapid growth of AI in recent years, and undoubtedly it's here to stay. I'm sure in many applications it's here to enhance our lives and experiences. However, as often is the case, there's a dark side to AI, and you may have heard of the term deep fake technology. It's used a lot in the media. It's deep fake technology generates fake audio, fake text, fake videos, and fake images. They can be used to make false representations by fraudsters for their gain. I'm sure you've heard about the frauds where parents receive phone calls from a person they believe to be their child, asking for immediate bank transfers, or the Martin Lewis fraud back in July 2023, where a fake video went out where he was promoting an app linked to Tesla. These are very convincing, and it's reported that they only need about 3 to 5 seconds of someone's voice for this deep fake technology to create a convincing video or voice, which can be quite scary. And when you think about how that could be applied to the services that the council's providing and the processes, you start to wonder how this is going to materialise. But what is the risk to our partners? Having that heightened risk equips our staff to identify fraud, which is good. But the reality is we haven't seen that level of AI, that level of deep fake technology being used against the council. So the risk is there. The reality is it's not being used. What is the risk? Fraud is an international crime. Historically, we've seen emails and letters received by the council, and they're historically littered with incorrect grammar, spelling mistakes. The fraudsters that are attacking us, English isn't always the first language, and we're seeing these as red flags, and they're easily identifiable. With the emergence of generative AI, however, I believe we're starting to now see more professionally formatted letters, professionally formatted emails coming into the council, and that's where the risk lies. These red flags that identify them are not there for the staff to notice, so we need to be more aware. The staff need to be more diligent. They need to start spotting the things that can't be removed, the sender's email address, for example, and following processes and procedures that are there to mitigate those risks. A lot of these offences, if we follow the procedures of secondary authorisation on payments, going to a trusted number, not changing details based on phone calls or emails or letters, then these frauds could easily be detected. But it's about raising awareness. That's one risk that we've been reporting over the last 12 months. Second one is account compromises, which when I talk about this is equally scary to think about it occurring. And when I talk about account compromises, we're talking about an email account which is compromised by the fraudster. The common ways in which a fraudster will compromise someone's account be through a malicious email, encouraging you to click on a link, and it might take you to a false Outlook account login. So you'll put your details into that, and it captures your details, allowing them to log into your Outlook accounts. An attack on a website to get login details, for example, is another way. And this is a real risk, and SAFs have observed this across several schools, and nationally, at least one local authority has fallen victim to an account compromise. So where does the threat come from account compromise? The fraudster will access the staff member's Outlook account unbeknown to them, and in that time they can view what's happening. They can read the emails, they can establish who's involved in the processes. They'll get an idea of the tone and the language used in those emails. All of this that can be used when actually putting the fraud into play, and as well accessing sensitive information. The fraudster has the opportunity to review the emails, and what we've seen occur is rules set up on the email account to start to divert emails into subfolders. I have lots of subfolders in my Outlook account. If a rule was set up without my knowing to divert emails that contain the word invoice into a subfolder and then marked as unread, I wouldn't be aware of that immediately. It gives the fraudster that time to read that email, and when the opportunity arises where an invoice might be attached, they can edit that invoice, and then forward it on to the person they've established is responsible for the payment, for example. That officer then receives an internal email with an authorization to pay an invoice, and you can see how the fraud happens, and say we've observed these happen within the SAPS partnership. The risk is real. And then you add that with some generative AI that starts to type these emails and copy the tone, and you can see where that might go. So how do we prevent this? And this is something that SAPS have done lots of work on, which you're going to hear about in our report. Raising awareness. The term the human firewall is very apt for these types of fraud. We need to stop it at the front door, and that's through awareness, ensuring policies and procedures designed to mitigate these risks are followed. So I could speak to you for hours about lots of different risks. I've picked out two which are very relevant at the moment. I hope that's provided a useful and interesting insight to some of the risks. I'm happy to discuss them further, and we'll be doing more work going into this year to identify these threats as they materialise. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren and Phil. Thank you. Any questions from members? Yes, Councillor Hart.
A bit of a topic close to my heart, actually, this one. So I understand, obviously, that they can now clone fairly accurately legitimate invoices, and they can put malware in your computer and divert your emails so they can read them and further draw you into this fraud. That you're going to start paying money into a fictitious account or a false account in order to get large amounts of money. And the plan is to have this human firewall so that the staff are hyper vigilant. And I have to say, I'm not entirely clear, given the sophistication of these frauds, that they are entirely, I mean, they're very cleverly mimicking the real thing, using advanced technologies that are beyond the scope of most of us at this point. How the human firewall is going to work, because the whole purpose of this is to be as realistic as possible. And sometimes it's not really, like you say, well, check the email address. But in actual fact, if you're working in accounts and receiving lots of emails, you might not know what the email address is, unless there's going to be some kind of additional safeguard in place to say only these people are legitimate emails. And sometimes it's tiny little things. I put a dot in a different place, or, you know, and if it's particularly if it's someone you haven't dealt with before or a new member of staff, I'm not entirely sure how the human firewall is going to prevent quite malicious malware ending up in council computers.
Yeah, of course, the human firewall is the first line of defence. It's there to identify some of the more obvious frauds. It's the process. It's the controls and mitigation that the council's put in place that need to be followed to prevent these when they're not identified. And as you said, the fraudulent invoices are very convincing. A lot of the processes where we've got secondary authorization on payments, if that's followed, one compromised email account the fraud shouldn't be successful if there's that secondary authorization. If the staff members always follow the procedures of verifying any requests to change bank accounts through a trusted contact, then a very convincing email or phone call shouldn't allow that fraud to be successful. So you're quite right. We're not going to spot them all, but there are controls in place that need to be followed that give us that assurance that we will prevent a lot of these attacks.
Thank you. Any more comments and questions? Councillor Walcombe.
Well, it's good to see you again, Mr. Bowler and your colleague, and thank you for your instructive presentation. I read your report with interest in the notes here, and I see that 85 of the 111 cases of fraud brought to this council attention that you dealt with were to deal with council tax and the kinds of cases that you're dealing with. However, those cases seem to me to pale into insignificance compared to the much larger frauds that I see going on, not just in this council, but around the country. And my question to you is how far is your remit allowed to go so that when we see developers ignoring the warnings of water companies who say that there is not sufficient sewage treatment works to deal with the new houses that they have planned or to supply the water to them, that is dishonesty of a much, much larger kind. And I wonder if you have powers within the SAF to look into and investigate and possibly prosecute that kind of fraud.
Primary role for us is to protect the council's interests. So, for want of a better description, when the council becomes a victim of fraud, then that's what we'll deal with. So in the wider sense of the example that you've just given, that planning, if it was correctly applied for and there was nothing hidden and everything was done as it should be, then we wouldn't be involved in that. There's a wider and a much bigger issue, and I take your point about things like that, but that wouldn't fall in our remit. And as far as powers go, we are the investigative poor relation to many organisations out there. So, and for most councils, we don't have a statutory function. So the councils have a number of statutory functions, and fraud prevention isn't one of them. In the sense that you need a fraud investigation team to deal with it. The 151 officer, as I'm sure Stephen will tell you, is charged with protecting the council's finances, and in that sense, there's the protection of the finances, and that's why we're sitting in the room alongside Stephen and in support of the council. So all is not lost. Our head of service was recently in no finer location than the Cabinet Office itself, with Baroness Wolf discussing exactly some of these issues. How do they formalise a service like ours in respect of law enforcement? How does that become a formal thing? We don't have powers like the DWP for certain offences. We don't have, we're not warranted to the sense that we can use offences like and legislation like the police do, or the National Crime Agency, or HMRC, or the Borders and Immigration. So we are somewhat hamstrung, but we do an awful lot with what we can do, and those mainly around council tax. We have that legislation at our disposal, and also the Prevention of Social Housing Fraud Act, which gives us quite some awesome powers, rivaling some of what the police got, but it's in such a narrow and small area. This wider fraud that we're all seeing, everybody is seeing, we don't have those powers, with one exception, and we have a financial investigator who relies on the Proceeds of Crime Act powers, but we need a money laundering offence, or to have convicted someone in the first place, or looking to convict someone for a criminal offence, and then we go after the money. And we find that hurts quite well.
Thank you, Darren. Any more comments before we move on to the next item? Mark? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So sticking with you then, shared anti-fraud services, the report 23-24, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. And just like the training session, there's going to be a little bit of a split between Phil and I delivering this report. Phil will be dealing with the area of fraud awareness and prevention, which starts in your bundle at pages 26 over to page 28. and I'll provide you with an overview of the rest of the report. And perhaps when Phil follows me, we'll take questions at that point, Chair, if you're happy for that to happen, so we can deal with them all in one go. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Yeah.
So the report before you is the work undertaken by the Shares Anti-Fraud Service to protect the Council against the threat of fraud and the delivery of the Council's anti-fraud action plan for the last financial year, 2023 to 2024. And I'm going to take it that the report has been read. Members are recommended to note the activity and all the activity by officers and SAFs to protect the Council. So the completion of operational days, that objective was set at 285 days. You will see in our KPI measurement that we've recorded 211, which is 74% against that objective. And that's not to say that this target was not met because the work was not undertaken. It's due to an inability to correctly record that time, and that's affected all our partners this year. And that's because we had a new case management system that came into operation in April last year, which was not able to record all the time as it was intending that it would do on going live. And when we did manage to get the time recording facility working with the provider, the functionality wasn't as enabled as it should have been. But since that system, the time recording system has been fixed and is up and running, which was basically fully in the second half of the last financial year. The time recording is at the level that we would expect. So what you're seeing in the second half of the year is what we should have been seeing in the first half of the year. It's working really well now. The staff are very confident and happy in using it. So next year, that time recording metric will look a lot different. A target that we also haven't been able to report on for this financial year is the action on reported fraud, which is at KPI 3, which is the response to urgent and high-risk cases. Again, that's an issue with our new case management system. It's been unable to be configured as it was hoped. And again, this is not to say that the response is not being met as promised. And it's that sort of a case that will be picked up and dealt with as needed, because those urgent cases invariably are the ones that come from senior officers. So there is some assurance that if it's not getting done, not only will the head of service be hearing about it, but I'm sure members here will as well. So it's just an issue of us being able to measure that and provide a complete data set. Cases referred. The referrals increased slightly last year to 111, and that follows a slight increasing trend in the recent years. But overall, that trend is one of consistency we see since we've been working at East Hart. An explanation in that section is also provided for failed referrals, and I just want to highlight, I think it's quite important to understand the reasons that they're not pursued further. And they're explained in that body of the report. What it may suggest, however, is that the ability to report concerns via this facility is being taken up, but unfortunately these reports, a large majority of them, just may not relate to this council, and it's not something that we can deal with for those people referring the matters onto us. Low risk cases. As part of the risk assessment of cases, when they all come in, and we identified 48 last year as low risk and suitable for a compliance approach, and these were council tax cases. We are in difficult financial times, and we appreciate that fully. And we're also here to deal with, as been mentioned earlier this evening, those more serious cases where it needs that resource and an appropriate resource to respond to those type of allegations. So by using a compliance approach in council tax cases, which we refer to as council tax reviews, we have a system in place to contact council tax payers. That approach has identified £42,000 of council tax and housing benefit fraud, and some of that is in the process of being recovered. And so the closed cases in the year we identified £61,000 of recoverable losses and savings. The case closure in the year have reduced, and that is in part due to the move to the compliance approach. So instead of going from a referral to a case, we've separated out the compliance approach, calling them council tax reviews, and where they would have gone previously to a case, and we would have spent more resource and time pursuing them. We've had a compliance approach to get the system put right and stop the ongoing loss earlier and recover as much money as possible. So those cases that would have, those referrals that would have gone to cases have stayed as reviews and have not made it to a case. So we've got a lesser pot of cases, which then has knock-on effect that those investigators dealing with the cases can concentrate on those cases, whilst those that team dealing with the council tax reviews can deal with those. So financial sanctions are an appropriate way of dealing with cases where a decision for a criminal prosecution may not reach the threshold, or it may be inappropriate to bring a criminal prosecution. And there are 15 instances of sanctions used, and they all relate to council tax cases. And those 15 sanctions totaled £1,050, which in itself isn't a lot of money, but we've stopped the ongoing loss, got the system put right as early as possible, and we are sending a deterrent effect. That will be talked about locally in the community to those people that have been affected, and we like to think that that knock-on effect will deter other people. And it also has a double benefit of removing the need for criminal prosecution, which is resource intensive and financially intensive. So the National Fraud Initiative and the Fraud Hub, these are both fraud and error detection opportunities, as well as an opportunity to reduce the ongoing losses. The National Fraud Initiative is a biannual process, and that's due to start again in this autumn, with its results coming out early next year and into the spring. The Fraud Hub is a rolling 3-month programme managed locally by SAFs with the support of teams at the council uploading data. And that's intended to capture fraud earlier than the biannual exercise, and then prevent those ongoing losses earlier. And it will also positively impact on the vast number of matches in the national exercise, which becomes burdensome and reduces the appetite to deal with that high number of cases. And that's possible because we're using the same data. It's the same system, and the simplest way of explaining what the Fraud Hub is, it's like the national exercise light version. So the losses and savings of the National Fraud Initiative identified for the council last year was £63,000, and in the Fraud Hub last financial year, losses and savings of £53,000. And this indicates the worth and further potential of both of those systems if a higher number of matches can be cleared. There were less matches than we would have liked cleared in the National Fraud Initiative. As I've said, there are high numbers, and it is a burdensome task, and there is a lot of resource required, and quite frankly there's just not enough resource to go around everywhere to get everything done. So the Fraud Hub is an alternative that is helping us to reduce those bigger numbers and get the turnover quicker. Other data matching that we've conducted the last financial year is a system called Analyse Local, and that's in relation to business rates using the framework for council tax. That was also undertaken. With additional new revenue for business rates of £63,000 for East Herts Council, and across the county we've seen an uplift of council tax bills of £349,000. So that's a service paid for by the county council, which has some benefit for the local councils, but as Hertfordshire a whole, that's a big increase in the council tax budget. So I'm going to hand you over to Phil, who's going to fill you in the bits that I haven't, and then we'll come back to questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll take you back to page 26. I'll talk you through the SAF's work around fraud awareness and prevention for the last 12 months. We work closely with the council to develop an anti-fraud culture, and we assisted the council prevent fraud occurring through exploring effective controls and mitigation. We continue to provide members of the public and staff with a means of reporting fraud, and that was through the online process. The council has the link on the webpage, and it allows a quick and effective way of reporting fraud that goes straight into our case management system. We met the target of delivering 5 training sessions to staff, which included general fraud awareness and ID document training. And this was supplemented by the council's e-training module that's available to all staff. There was 3 areas of work that we developed last year that specifically looked at fraud prevention and increasing our capacity in that area alongside our investigation capabilities. And the first of these were our executive reports. Executive reports are a means of SAF's investigators analysing the incidents that they've investigated and provide an insight in how the fraud materialised. And through this identification and looking at weaknesses and limitations in processes, these reports look at the recommendations made to that service to strengthen those controls. So we're not just investigating now, we're identifying how we can learn and move on from these incidents, and through making recommendations to our service heads through action management plans, we hope that we can affect change and reduce those incidents going forward. The SAF's knowledge gained across our partnership, we produce generic executive reports. So we're taking information from a number of local authorities, and last year SAF shared 3 generic executive reports with the council addressing fraud risks within payroll, undeclared multiple employment, and issuance of mayoral certificates of appreciation. Fraud risk assessments. This was a programme which we rolled out last year, looking at specific service areas, identifying the fraud risks in those areas. And last year we shared a generic report to all partners around the associated risks of undeclared multi-employment within agency staff. Fraud alerts was developed last year. We introduced these alerts as a way of keeping staff aware of the emerging threats, which I discussed in the training agenda point. We issued 5 last year, and they've now become bi-monthly reports. So through looking at local trends within the SAF's partnership, as well as those nationally, we're able to keep our service areas up to date with the relevant issues. And complementing the bi-monthly alerts, we also issue live threat alerts. We issued 5 last year. So where a risk is significant and we need to make the service area or the council as a whole aware of those, we're issuing those real-term threat alerts to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just turning to the members, have you got any comments or questions?
I'm going to ask a cheeky question. If I was a resident looking at the cost of being a member of the SAFS at over £89,000, can you reassure me that that's good value for money in terms of the costs, the benefits outweighing the costs of that, and the reductions in fraud and access to services and alerts to prevent future fraudulent activity?
I think I can, yes. The service that you get, if you were to go out privately and try and to acquire it, it would be considerably a lot more. So the first question is, do you actually need that? Well, I think as we're discovering, just from some of the stats in the report, there are issues. Where there is money, potentially there's going to be some fraud, and it's about how do we investigate that and how do we deal with that. And with the streamlining of council resources, in most of our partners, that just doesn't exist anymore and hasn't for some considerable time. And it becomes very reactive. We try to be proactive in our approach, hence the engagement, the training, the prevention. And these numbers probably could be a lot bigger if that wasn't in place. So as a package, there are added benefits that are not just purely numbers in that report of identified losses and savings going forward. And admittedly, those losses still have to be recovered. So they're recoverable losses, but can we recover them as well? But could anybody recover them? And the answer to that is potentially no, they couldn't. But we've identified them, we learn from what those issues are, and we get the system put right. And we endeavour to do that as quickly as possible to prevent further fraud and further losses. All of the data matching, it's a huge ask, and not many councils out there run the fraud hub, and that comes off the back of the National Fraud Initiative. And the National Fraud Initiative is a hugely resource intensive biannual operation. And if we can reduce that by running the fraud hub, us pulling those matches out and dealing with it, cleaning all of that data. So by December of this year, when the first lots of data will be submitted up, that data should be clear and clean. We will always get odd matches, incorrect data, because we're matching it against the data from other organisations, which may not be as clean as ours now. So that is a help in dealing with that issue, and that comes as part of the package as being with SAF. So there are all sorts of benefits, and as we were talking about earlier, not being able to tell you that we've referred to all of those urgent cases, I can tell you that we have. I just can't give you the stats for that, but you know, you can't necessarily pick up to organisations out there and try and report fraud and expect some to give you a call back that same day, and then start dealing with that investigation the same day or the day after, depending on what time the call is made. So I think value for money is there.
Thank you, that's very reassuring.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor.
Just to follow up on your question about time, the processing time, obviously, because you're reliant on the availability of your staff, the information that's coming in from other agencies. But in terms of fraud prevention, if we're not moving at quite a reasonable speed, actually, those same frauds are going to keep they're going to keep repeating until the problem's been identified and a proper mitigation plan's been put in place. So I'm not quite clear why, if you've identified a high risk fraud event, why it's taking a long time to respond to it, because surely we should be responding quite quickly. Or if I misunderstood something in what you're saying.
I think you may. The time that we respond to things, the cases, we will create a case on our case management system within 2 days is what we said. Invariably, it's less than a day. The response in real terms will be someone from here picking up a phone to me, Nick, or our fraud team, and us speaking to them and doing something instantly. We may record that case later on that day. Or the next morning, depending on what time of day we get the phone call. So that the response is immediate. The plan then gets put in place, how we then deal with it, and that will be a staged reaction plan. Some things we have to do instantly. Sometimes I have to tell the financial investigator, forget what you're doing. We need to sort this money out that's left a council, ended up in a bank account that we don't know about, and we need that money not to leave that bank account. And at that point, the phone call is then made to the bank of that account where that account is held, and a temporary freeze is put on that bank account. So the reaction time is instant. The recording of that time will be within our limits of putting on a case management system within a day. But I'm not sure what else I can say, because I'm not quite sure that where that question has arisen out of.
Well, I suppose it comes in an environment of super fast payments. I mean, you know, there tends to be, you know, you make a payment to the bank account, and like it literally 30 seconds later that money has disappeared in the bank account with it. That's how fraud operates. They don't go into bank accounts that sit around for days waiting for somebody to notice that there's been a fraudulent activity. Otherwise, you know, we'd all recover money really easily, and we don't. So I'm just a bit curious, that's all about, because you're talking about the time it takes between, I probably misunderstood something because you're giving a lot of information, but it's, and I'm trying to follow what you're saying, but it, you're talking about the time lag because you're relying on all these other people, although I can understand that you have an opportunity to record the fraud. It somehow feels like you're always playing catch up, or have I just kind of misunderstood something?
That's a very good way of putting it. We like to get ahead of the curve. We like to be proactive to prevent it in the first place. Once it's happened, we go out and ask other people to give us information, and that comes from a variety of different sources. And we are just one of a long number of people asking of that organisation for the same information just on a different case. So that's where we get delays in the investigation period. If we can stop it instantly, we will. You know, just to give you a very quick, brief example, we've seen some mandate frauds where the money has moved unbelievably quickly, not just from one account to another, from one jurisdiction to another. They're using, in one particular case, we had money dissipated from Korea, Taiwan, West Africa, and China in minutes on an app that is used widely outside of the UK to move money in countries where banks aren't trusted and things like that. So as soon as it's gone into one account and that account is then linked to an app, and they've got them both sitting there, the money's gone. And there's very little we can do once it's gone and it's in a foreign jurisdiction. And to be honest with you, retrospective recovery of that cash is only ever going to be done by the police. And in most of those cases, that won't happen at all, in my experience, having been in that position. So we will move as quickly, you know, if Stephen says he's got a problem and something's happened, that money will get frozen. We have done that. We have been able to do that for other partners. We've not needed to do that here at East Hars. But that option is available to do. But it's a set of circumstances and how that all plays out, of which we don't have control until we get called.
Thank you. Any more members? No. So Nick.
Yeah, thanks. Just two. Can I ask two questions? One, just building on Councillor Nichols' point actually around the value for money of the service. So which I get the argument. The question I had though was the service was based on 285 days, and you talked about why it was 211 days, not 285 days. But I couldn't quite. So presumably when the cost was set, there was an expectation of that many days. So does that mean going forward, if there's fewer days, the cost will be less? I was just trying to get my head around how the cost links to the number of days. So that's sort of one question. And then the other one was around the you mentioned the compliance approach, and I just wanted to understand the compliance. So as I understand it, the compliance approach is where something's reported and there's some correspondence, for example, with the individual concerned saying we've noted an error, we've now put it right, so please pay the right amount of money. That's what it sounded like. I just wanted to understand a little bit more around who decides around the compliance approach and what that means. Does that mean that we don't go back and reclaim some fraudulent activity, and it's only looking forward, and we let people off what's gone on in the past? So if you could just say a little bit more around that compliance approach, that'd be great.
So I'll start with the compliance. So we will get a referral in, for example, that will say someone's not telling you what their personal domestic situation is at that particular house, and we think they're getting away with not paying the right council tax. We'll write out to them, having conducted some of our own inquiries to verify the data and make sure that we're not dealing with something malicious, and there might be something a little bit more to them. And it's a very nice letter. Would you mind awfully reviewing your personal circumstances, filling in this form, and let us know if there's been any changes recently? And then that can get elevated depending on what the response is. And often the response is positive. I'm awfully sorry, I forgot to tell you, this is what's happened in my personal life. My circumstances have changed, and this is when they changed. We'll review the timeline that we've been provided with, and then look at what we think may have happened. If we agree with them, then we'll advise the council tax team that's the situation. If we don't, we may then elevate that up. And if we do find that it's for a much bigger period, or there's a flat refusal to engage, then that compliance process then has in it some more additional steps on top to bring it on due course and make sure what we've got is right. We can spend, and that's dealt with by our intel team. So they do many things, but they do that very well. And it saves it going to an investigator who's got the more serious cases where we definitely know that there's a long period of a housing benefit claim and a council tax claim, and we're working jointly with DWP. We don't want to expend that resource on cases where it may be just the council tax only, maybe a small element of housing benefit, and that we can get it put right with some cooperation and understanding. And that process at that point becomes a little bit more rigorous. And then that's how we then manage that situation. So if it's a past period, we don't let it go. We have to be evidence-based, of course. We can't just, well, it could have been maybe. We go with some evidence, and we have systems that we can use to find out and verify what people are suggesting may or may not be the case. So that's that one. The days were delivered, they just weren't recorded on the time system. So all the work was being done. As you can see, that there's a lot of work completed within that report. It's just that when you're on the system, you couldn't record that I've been working on this case for 90 minutes. And then when it came into being recording, it was supposed to be automatic. So when you're in the case, it records your time for you. So there was a variation in the recording of time potentially in about 3 months, 2 months in the second quarter, which meant that it probably wasn't being recorded correctly by the officers. Once it became up and running in the last the 6 months of the year, we could see that everything was as it should be. We had an automation working in the background, recording the time whilst you've got the case open and working on it. And you can then add additional time. So you will do things that are off case. So you'll go out and see a witness and take a statement. That time has to be recorded and that's entered manually. So it's a much better system now. This last 6 months are definitely on par as to what we were expecting to see. And then next year will be the proof of what we're saying today is that those recorded and delivered, if not potentially over-delivered.
So I think what you're saying is the 211 days isn't an accurate representation of the number of days in the last year.
It's purely down to they weren't recorded, not that they weren't delivered.
Thank you. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify to members, we don't buy a number of days for the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. We buy a service from the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. So in the case of the Crown Court, the Magistrates Court in St Albans, we had significantly above 280 days of input from SAFs during the course of that year, but we paid the same fee. So we're buying a service from SAFs, and it allows them to flex resources. We are not buying a fixed number of days, which is a different approach to which we have with the Shared Internal Audit Service. And again, with the Shared Internal Audit Service, we're moving away from a fixed number of days and getting fixated about days as to buying a service, which allows the resources to be moved more flexibly. And certainly in terms of what we've had from the SAF service, particularly supporting that case, we've had more than that. It's an average number of days that was worked out when we founded the Shared Anti-Fraud Service many moons ago, and Geeks Hearts was a founding partner along with the County Council. So I don't want members to get fixated about the number of days and the time recording here, because it really doesn't matter in terms of what we're paying for SAFs, because we're paying for a service that ensures that we detect and prevent fraud.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Oh, sorry, Darren.
Thank you, Stephen. And it's just a metric to indicate that there is, like we were saying, some value for money. How do you know what you've got? But there's, as Stephen was saying, there's always more. And some partners need more some years and just need the average amount most years. And that's how the shared service works.
Thank you.
And you wanted an update or just where we are this year so far, I believe, from Michelle. Do you want that? It's 2 lines, literally, if you want it.
Okay. Yes, Darren, if you could.
So this is just a very brief update of our stats, and they are only for April because unfortunately we're not just out of May yet, so that the data hasn't been run and analysed. So purely for the month of April, and I'll give you much more detail in the next one, which is an update on our progress on the plan at the next meeting. So in the month of April, there were 11 referrals. 2 of them came from staff here. We're carrying 19 live referrals, so they're being worked on. 13 live investigations, and in the month of April, we closed 2 cases. In respect to the council tax review issue, there were 6, and I'm mentioning that now because I'll give you the further detail next time. But there were 2 substantial cases within that council tax review that have come to light, and the cases are still being worked on. So that's why I can't give too many more details now. But one is a combined value of housing benefit and council tax of £107,000, and the other one is £48,000. So those figures are accurate. We just now need to deal with those cases and work out what's going on with them. So again, the figures at the end of next year will be substantially different, I would imagine, to what they are now, based on those 2 massive figures. But I hope to be able to give you more information on those at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no more questions, I'll just read out the recommendations. Members are recommended to note the activity undertaken by the Shared Anti-Fraud Service to deliver the 23-24 anti-fraud plan for the council, and to note all anti-fraud activities undertaken by officers and SAFS to protect the council. So members, this item is for noting and does not require a vote. Item number 8. Sorry, oh, sorry, I was expecting you at the back for some reason, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This annual internal audit report summarises audit activity and outcomes for 2023-24, bringing it all together under annual assurance opinions for both financial systems and non-financial systems, as shown at page 51 of your report pack. The substantial assurance opinion for financial systems reflects a sound system of internal control and risk management, and the reasonable assurance opinion for non-financial systems a generally sound position, that opinion just partly being influenced by 2 limited assurance reports. Further details of the individual audit outcomes and the opinions we provided are in the tables on page 52 and in the supporting appendix at page 56. There's also quite a lot of narrative in the report. In summary, it describes what internal audit does, how it does it, and more importantly, why. The report also shows the framework of quality assurance that is applied to how we operate, a little bit about the public sector internal audit standards against which we're reporting general compliance. There's also content at page 53 and 54, which shows how the service fared last year against its performance indicators and the main service developments that took place during the year. There is an audit charter for 2024-25 this year, starting at page 62. This document is effectively a terms of reference for the internal audit service. For example, it sets out the authority and responsibilities that the service has with the council. The charter is reviewed and approved annually by this committee. You may like to note that it's essentially unchanged from last year, basically apart from some cosmetic changes such as dates and so on. Lastly, most of the agenda item is for noting, except for the charter, which members are asked to approve for this year. There's also a slightly quirky technical requirement for management to confirm or otherwise to the committee that the scope and resources of internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations last year. The council's chief financial officer traditionally provides that confirmation, but is usually asked to do so by the committee chair. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. So questions and comments. Councillor Deering.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I hope this question isn't misplaced, but anyway, let's see where we go. I think everybody in the room knows that the position with the external audit is really not good at all. Not the fault of this council at all. It's entirely the fault, as I understand it, of the external auditors. And it's also a problem that relates to councils up and down the country. So just to be very clear, it's not of this council's making at all. But to what degree is that compromising or making difficult what you do?
I would suggest it doesn't. The roles are discrete. External audit, I suppose, in summary, provides a true and fair view of the council's financial statements, along with some other opinions. Internal audit is focused on the council's internal control environment and the management of risk and threats. So I wouldn't say we're mutually exclusive, but we don't duplicate our work. We're not dependent on each other.
Thank you. Any more questions from members? No. Nick, Mark, you're okay. So thank you very much. So if I just quickly go through the recommendation, I've got a point here for Stephen. So the members are recommended to note the annual assurance statement and internal audit report, note the results of the self-assessment required, and accept the SIAS audit charter. And this is where I turn to Stephen. Seek management assurance that the scope of the resources for internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 23-24. Stephen.
Chairman, I'm happy to confirm that they were not subject to unreasonable limitations during the year in question.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. So I ask for a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Nichols.
I'll propose.
Thank you very much. Yes. Seconder, Councillor Williams. Thank you. So a quick vote then, show of hands. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. And no against, and this is carried. Thank you very much. So if you guys want to hang around, feel free. If you want to leave, feel free as well. It's entirely up to you, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you. So an interesting inclusion here for the leisure contract report. Sarah was, I think, due to give this, but is it going to be, oh, Sarah, oh my God. Gone blind for a minute. Sorry, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm very sorry for my late arrival. I haven't really got a good excuse apart from poor calendar management, but I'm very glad to be here tonight to introduce this. So I'm a beneficiary of the latest development at Hartham. It was a great privilege to be able to open it in September. It's the first time I believe there's been a significant soft play in Hertford, and figures demonstrate that that's been a really popular addition. There's also been the new pitch opened up at Grange Paddocks, which has been really popular as well. Unfortunately, this year has seen the closure of Ward Freeman Pool, but work is taking place to hopefully get that reinstated as well. But I'm aware that Dan's put together a more detailed presentation, so I shall pass you over to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time today. Bit more infographics. I think I killed you all by PowerPoint last year, so we're back here again. We're down to, I think, just 20 slides rather than the 40 that I came with last year. our key attribute is in terms of delivering community value, in terms of getting people to be more active in our community. One of the things with the opening of Hartham, we've seen finally, last year we passed over 1 million visits. This year, and the leisure contract at the moment works in calendar years, which is why the figures are for 2023. And we've already seen a great start this year. So previous year, we saw 1.4 million people visit the leisure services, which is an increase of 23%. Equally, one of the things that we spoke about in previous things is the impact of social value. The leisure industry needs to demonstrate its role in the community. That is through keeping people out of hospitals. There is a little bit of a minor for people that do injure themselves through sport and various different bits and pieces. In 2023, that figure is £5.5 million worth of social value to the people of East Herts in terms of helping their well-being. One of the key things is that participation is great, but that kind of reach out into unique members is the more critical thing in terms of getting out into that community. Last year, we saw 35,000 unique visitors. That's 5,000 more unique peoples. So while Sarah may well come to the centre every day as an example, it's important that we get more and more people to kind of do that. One of the things that we do as part of Everyone Active is that we've got an elite sporting champions program for young people and aspiring athletes. I don't believe that we've got anybody that's got a letter to tell them that they're heading over to France this year, but we've got 23 people on that scheme that benefit from free activities in the centre. From a staffing perspective, the majority of our staff are based in East Herts. We have 123 local partnerships with 44 local swimming schools, 11 local clubs, and 65 clubs that benefit from using the dry side and wet side activities at either Hartham. One of the things that we spoke about that is customer satisfaction. We basically have a post-user survey that goes out remotely, so it's not something that we're standing at the door. It goes out via our communication channels. Last year, we achieved a customer satisfaction score of 81.6%. Actually, a little bit down from last year by 0.85%. Some of those are down to the challenges that we've had opening centres and delays, and obviously Buntingford closing is a factor there. In terms of the economic climate that we live in, one of the key things that we look at is that value for money score. Last year we saw that increase by 0.7% up to 78.1%. So on slides, an overview in terms of what anybody that was around at the Hartham launch would have seen a fantastic investment from you guys as a local authority in terms of that local centre. Sadly, my son loves soft play too much, and it is a real pickle to pull him off the top part of the soft play. That's a 3-tier structure, but I can conclude that my core strength is getting better to get him downstairs, and we haven't had any reportable accidents from that. If you can go on to the next slide. We've also, across various different parts, one of the things that we learnt when we opened Grange Paddocks is that there was a look from some of the from the Leaventhorpe members. So we've invested probably £35,000 in a refresh of the gym over at Wall Freeman. We've changed some of the cardio equipment around at Leaventhorpe and created some different multi-purpose spaces. Equally, again, what we've done in terms of change rooms, so Leaventhorpe and Fanshawe are obviously quite aged facilities. We've invested in the retailing of the wet side shower floors to try and provide a better customer experience for people. And at Fanshawe in September, we updated the accessible change rooms. So the key thing for us on the next slide is the total attendances. And as we kind of highlighted, this is just a very quick overview in terms of to give you that increase in terms of what we've got. So in the top right hand side, you'll see this over the period that Everyone Active has managed the contract on behalf of Everyone Active. You'll see a massive increase in terms of participation. This year we're aiming for 1.6 million visits, and we're on course looking at some of the numbers of what we've got. In the monthly reports that we send to the client officers, we were very positive in 2023 that we were seeing 110,000 visits on average a month. That's starting to get closer to 120,000 visits a month, which is really positive in terms of what we've got. On the next slide, it will talk you through some of our KPIs in terms of target demographics. Obviously, young people are critical in terms of making sure the next generation are active. There's a few things in terms of there's a lot to kind of digest, and I did warn everyone it was going to be death by PowerPoint and Excel, I'm afraid. overall, the numbers are very positive because of the total increase. There's a few things for us to look at this year around 12 to 16 market. So one of the things that we're looking at is team gym. This fiscal year, we're looking at opportunities in terms of how we can increase that target market for that 12 to 16 demographic, which, although it went up by 2.5%, we kind of feel that there's more growth in there in terms of what we're offering for people. On the next slide, it will talk about the older adults, and we know that East Hart starts to have an aging demographic. One of the key things that we see now is that that's actually outstripped the general attendance. So the general attendance increased by 23%. In older adults over the age of 60, that increased by 32%. So great to kind of see things like swimming. Equally, in terms of at Harton, we've now got a wider range of activities in terms of what we're offering. So there's more demand for things like yoga, more demand for lighter activities. And one of our objectives for this year is for us to get out into the community more, start to target some of the lighter activities like seated exercise, and start to look at generating more long-term condition sessions that we've got in our centres, and start to expand our remit and influence outside. On the next slide is a breakdown in terms of swimming activity. So to give, year on year, again, this is going to change next year because of wall swimming not necessarily being in 2024. It gives you a real indication that swimming attendances has increased by 9%. Previous highest year was 2014, and we've eclipsed that by 70,000 visits, which, is fantastic to kind of see. On the next slide is a breakdown in terms of swimming by age ranges. So you kind of get an impact to see how that affects in terms of the under 16 market, adult markets, and the 60 plus market. So one of the things that I highlighted earlier is that we'd seen a very good over and above average boost from the senior market. So on the bottom, you've got some ideas in 2 initiatives that we've got. So inflatables, family swimming with fun sessions. That's something that we offer out and is very loud, very noisy, and very popular. Swimming lessons, we've also introduced quiet swimming. So one of the things that we've worked a lot with over the last 12 to 18 months is neurodiversity groups. We've got a Parkinson's initiative in East Harts where any sufferers of Parkinson's get free access to our centres. And one of the things that we've kind of learned is they would like to work in a centre or like to exercise sometimes in quieter circumstances. So with the quieter swim sessions that we've put on, generally the attendance is capped, so it's not so busy. We try not to tally it up so there's not swimming lessons at the same time, so it's not super noisy, and it's just a very gentle swim. At the moment, those sessions are hugely popular, and that's something that certainly over the summer we're going to roll out some quieter gym sessions where, although our choice of music is sometimes questionable, there'll just be a quieter gym session where unfortunately you'll probably just hear the gym's weights bash up and down. On the next slide is a breakdown of our fitness activities in terms of what we've got. So you'll see that with the advent and launch of Hartum, you see that gym attendances has increased significantly. There's a breakdown on the launch, some promotions in terms of what we do for launch weekends and the group exercise programs. We know that if people exercise together in a group at a set time, it encourages them to come along. I'm the worst person to come into work in my gym kit and realizing that it's got to lunchtime and I actually haven't done anything just yet, which is why now I've put myself into spin sessions. On the next slide, we then break down our fitness activities by age range, so you'll get an understanding of what we're doing for junior gym. That number's very popular. There's obviously a balance in terms of striking that, because obviously where you're dealing with 11 to 16-year-olds, there's certain activities they can do and certain activities they can't do. It's not necessarily an open session in the same way it is for seniors. So for the older adult market, again, you've seen a welcome return in terms of those numbers. On the next slide is a breakdown of our kind of key activity users, so our fitness membership. Now, remarkably, Hartum has a greater membership base than Grange Products at the moment, and we've seen a 30% increase year on year in relation to where we've got to. That investment in terms of Hartum is massive and is going hugely well for us. Anybody that's been down will know that it's a fantastic facility for the local community. Equally, from a learn to swim perspective, with the swim pools that we've got, we know that it's a chicken and egg scenario. Now, the numbers in terms of where they were at the peak are slightly down. The numbers obviously take out Wolf Freeman. So we were just under 5,000 at the moment. Year on year, that is a growth. We were very fortunate through that circumstances at Wolf Freeman at 300 of 500 that were on that scheme have moved across to 3 different sites. Some of them haven't gone to Leaventhorpe for obviously geographic reasons. We obviously have a big focus in terms of adult and child lessons. And having had a toddler go to those lessons, it's amazing to kind of see the impact of what that gives children with water confidence. On the next slide is the breakdown in terms of our customer feedback and a breakdown of our customer experience. So again, from a fitness perspective, we saw a slight drop last year. There were some delays around the Harton project. It was due to open around April, then July, and then finally opened up in September. So we were kind of in a situation that we kind of moved from not ideal to a very ideal scenario once the gym opened at Harton. The value for money score increased. Satisfaction, again, a slight drop down in terms of doing that. And again, that net promoter score has changed slightly in relation to what we've got. One of the more positive things is we have seen more people report back to us that they see that a benefit, that using the centres has benefited their well-being. From an active travel perspective, there's obviously an investment in a lot of cycling racks at Harton. We've seen a marginal increase in terms of that. And again, from a swim perspective, we saw a slight decrease in relation to that, which is coupled with cleanliness, that we've got improvement plans of how we're planning to manage that. On the next slide is a breakdown of some of our operational activities. From an accident perspective, we have a benchmark that basically talks about accidents per 10,000 visits. In the leisure environment, we do tend to get a lot of kids that pick their scabs or are pushing each other in a queue to get into swimming lessons. Those kind of things where we've provided first aid for those things that are taken out. So this is just an understanding in terms of actual physical accidents in the centre. That number across the industry is around 3.5% to 4% as a benchmark. Across East Hearts, that's 1.1 accident per 10,000 visits. So it's a positive score, but again, obviously we don't want people to be injured or hurt using the centres. We obviously have a massive drive towards digitalisation. So we've got the Everyone Active app, and we've seen essentially a 6.7% increase in terms of the number of people that are using and interacting with our services digitally, whether that's booking their classes online, whether that's booking swim lessons, whether that's asking to change their feedback. One of the things that we have seen is we use an app called Single Customer View. So all of the information that comes from our website, all the information that comes from any customer feedback is coordinated through one system. Now, essentially what we see is that we get we're getting best part of 120,000 visits a month. You know, we are getting over 150 customer feedbacks a month in relation to what they're saying about services or what they feel that we could do differently. From a funding perspective, we applied for half funding camps at Grange Paddocks, and we were very fortunate to see a £10,000 increase in terms of what we saw from there. There's a breakdown that we report back to the council on the number of residents that are using the service. Obviously, because of Harton, that figure has fell slightly. That fell by 1% to 73%. On the next slide is just a breakdown of our colleagues. One of the things that we focused on very quickly to talk about is just the number of colleagues that are dementia friendly trained and have an awareness of on that. We also have a focus in terms of training new colleagues. So we've generated training for 30 new lifeguards last year. On the next slide, I didn't realise it moved. So I've also learned that I know how to do clever things from PowerPoint I don't know how to do. From an environmental perspective, last year we spoke about the energy crisis and the cost. We've been very fortunate in relation to how Everyone Active purchased their energy, that we've actually got some cheaper prices than what we did in the previous year. We have, in terms of energy consumption, seen a decrease of 4.9% in gas. Sadly, we've seen an increase of 9.7%. Coupled with Harton, that came online in September, and obviously at Harton, without getting into the details, there's an air source heat pump that powers the heating for the new part of the building and the cooling. So obviously there's a switch in terms of the utilities that we're using, which is not something that we didn't necessarily anticipate. And then on the next slide, it's just an idea in terms of just giving you guys a breakdown of what we do outside of some of the numbers. So we've had a girls' football festival. Sarah highlighted the outdoor pitch at Grange Paddocks, hugely popular. We've had Harrogate Town come down from their National League 2 sides to come and train with us when they're playing in London. And that just gives you an overview in terms of some of the things that we've done. Similarly, on the second page, in terms of our community engagement in the community, one of the things that we're focused on this year is trying to set up community cafes in our centres so that we have an activity going on every month that brings people in, whether that's just certainly the idea that we've got over the summer is that we're going to have some activities for parents to do, whether that's free activities with swing balls or being around the play schemes and just being able to be in the centre. So the next slide is our plans for 2024, which we've already achieved. So we saw the spin room at Hartham reopen in January. We've just introduced a wellness membership, which is a premium type of membership, which gives people the opportunity to purchase a number of additional benefits. We've linked in and just started at Hartham a musculoskeletal program called Good Boost, which now the guys have gone, I can talk about AI positively, which gives customers an understanding that they can either do an aquatics or a land session, and the Good Boost technology recommends activities and exercises, and that our instructors will take them through that as part of those sessions. Big focus for this year is in terms of exercise referral. I think I've spoken for 10 minutes. Your questions?
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you, Sarah. So any questions or comments? Oh, yes, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. On one of the slides, there was mention about funding, an increase of 17,000, I think it was. So could you just talk through what that actually represented and how that worked? Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did at Grange Paddocks was the HAF camps, which is health, activity and food programs. So via the Heart Sports, they've actually just changed their name. So Heart Sports Partnership is not what they're called anymore. Heart Sports Physical Activity Partnership set up a program which we were able to get funding for I believe we did 5 camps last year, where children can come in free from disadvantaged backgrounds that may necessarily not get a meal at home during the school holidays and can participate in activities and if you like, a traditional holiday camp.
Please, Chair. So in other words, this was external funding which helped you to basically carry out some of the additional activities for those groups. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Councillor Nichols.
Goes without saying that the loss of the pool in Buntingford is a massive loss to the community and surrounding Buntingford and surrounding villages. But thank you for your help that you've given the pool group in hoping to go forward with a plan to reopen. I just wondered if you incurred any financial penalties for ending your contract early for running the pool. I don't know if you're allowed to answer that one.
It's obviously an incredibly sad situation when we do that, and it's not a decision that anybody really wanted to take. So as far as I'm concerned, we haven't, and we're not necessarily, what our costs are what our costs. So there were a small level of colleagues that have been made redundant, and obviously during the period that the building remains in, if you like, a hiatus status whilst that's decided, there is very minimal energy costs, very minimal site costs that we're discussing with the council of putting that back, but it's being done at cost as opposed to anything else in terms of that. It doesn't benefit the community if we sit and read through contracts of what it says or what it doesn't say.
Okay. And I was interested whether you have any data on people that used to use Freeman Pool. You did mention about them using other services. I wonder if you know how many have moved to services within East Herts rather than moving to North Herts in Stevenage and Royston.
The short answer is we don't. So one of the things that we've been acutely aware of is obviously with the data, where that centre's closed, that data is kind of have been stored in a different scenario. So by proxy, we can look at people that are using Grange paddocks or people that are using Hertford or Ware and see whether they come from Buntingford and surrounding areas. But we've been acutely aware that we don't want to be sending them marketing messages to come join Hartham or anything like that. So we can. I don't have that data to hand. Is that something that you'd like me to go away and potentially explore?
Yeah, it was just out of interest because it'd be good to keep them within the district, I think, rather than. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, and just a last point. Do value for money and affordability are a more increasing issue for a lot of people? I just wondered what sort of concessionary rates you offer to those on low income and benefits.
Yeah, so there's concessionary membership in there. Yeah, obviously nowadays you can do things as a pay-as-you-go basis, and that's at a very affordable level. If I'm honest, I can't quote you what those prices are off the top of my head. From a membership perspective, I think you're looking at between 20 and 25% reduction of what that headline rate is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deering.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you ever so much for a really good presentation. Really vivid, wonderful. Thank you also for telling us, and me in particular, that age is just a number. It's very reassuring. Thank you.
We're looking for a figurehead of that campaign for this year, if that's something that you'd like.
I think I'll just be reassured. That's very nice of you. Perhaps members in the room will just bear with me when I just make the point that the investment in Harlton and Grange paddocks was driven by the previous Conservative administration. So we are obviously really, really pleased that it's gone so well. It's fantastic. Appreciate you and your team have put an awful lot of work into making sure that the customers come through the door. But this is exactly why we did what we did, and it's just wonderful to see the benefits. And thank you to you and your team for making sure it works. Thank you. Ages just.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Just a tiny point, I just picked up on the idea that obviously health and safety is paramount in a leisure centre, and I'm just a little bit curious why Grange paddocks has got a significantly higher rate of accidents than the other centres, or is it just reported differently? I'm not quite clear. Like they managed to get double the number.
Yeah, can I be brutally honest on that front?
Yes.
Are you talking about the metric in terms of accidents per 10,000 visits or the volume of accidents? Yeah, so in terms of what you're looking at, the volume of participation will be much higher at Grange paddocks, which is why we use that benchmark of accidents per 10,000 visits. So without trying to quickly scan through and see what the leisure client officers included in terms of what I sent. So there will be more people visiting Grange paddocks, which will naturally lead to that metric of there being more people to do that. One of the things that we found is that although the 3G pitch is amazing, it's also amazing the level of injuries that people put themselves through in terms of tackling and clashing of heads and various different bits and pieces. So sometimes it's a mix of activities. As much as the pools are obviously hugely vital areas that we get health and safety right because of the potential risk of what comes of them if people injure themselves in the pool. Grange paddocks is obviously a higher footfall in terms of what we've got. It is the highest footfall that we've got going through the contract. And secondly, it's just a different type of activities with the 3G pitch. Certainly, you're probably seeing 40 or 50 people every hour going through that 3G pitch as a minimum.
Thank you very much. Any more members? Okay, Nick.
I just wonder whether I could ask whether the significant improvement in step up in visitors, whether how that translates through into the financial performance.
Yes, it does. But backs it up in terms of the numbers, in terms of what we've got. Obviously, it's the public forum, so we're not necessarily in a situation that we're going to talk directly about financial performance. So, yes, you're seeing that, and yes, that is part of the contract in relation to the benefit in kind that will come back to the authority over time.
So financial performance is in line with expectations, I guess. Is that
no? Is the answer? It's exceeded.
Exceeded, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Great, thank you. And the second question, just around setting of targets. So I noticed several places there's reference to targets. Do we have specific targets for performance in 2024 and beyond in terms of those all those different areas which are you've been through?
We're a very data-rich industry.
Yeah.
As I've probably bored everyone today showing that. From a participation perspective, we kind of set a benchmark of 1% every year, and we're certainly exceeding that. And across the board, in terms of things like energy, there's a degree of levelling out that we need to achieve with Hartem to kind of do that, which is why at the moment you're kind of seeing that. We do. The key drivers in terms of the impact that we make in terms of the people and the demographics of what we've got. Obviously, with Hartem, it very much spews those numbers somewhat. So we are doing well, and our tougher times will come when we don't have brand new centres and we don't have brand new equipment to show off to the customers.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, enjoyed the presentation and the enthusiasm that went with it. Got three questions. First question is in terms of the social values are a big thing currently across government, across procurement, commissioning, etc. How do you come to the number of 5.5 million?
I don't. So COVID seems like a lifetime ago, but one of the things the leisure industry realised is that we're not a statutory authority, even if we think that we should be. And we needed to find an effective way as an industry to demonstrate the impact that we all talk about. Now, one of the things that Sheffield Hallam University did, and a group called Active Communities, is develop this social value calculator. So as a national provider that everyone active is, ourselves and the vast majority of leisure providers give our data to this Active Communities group using the Sheffield Hallam calculations. I've actually taken 5 slides out today that was all about that, so I'm happy if someone wants to share that with you at a later date. They then work that out based on the customer data that we've got, where they live, their age, the demographic profile from mosaic profiling, and work out whether how much that visit is actually going to provide from there. So it's not a finger in the air conversation. It's something that's been worked out as an industry in relation to what we've got, and we buy into this Active Communities information to give us that greater depth.
And compared to other contracts, is East Herts doing well on its social value?
The easy answer is yes, because the number's bigger, but you are looking at different apples and oranges, aren't you? You know, there is a lot more deprivation in boroughs like Broxbourne. So we're at the moment in St Albans, we're in Three Rivers, just gone into North Herts and Stevenage. So their demographic profile is very different. You know, so in terms of what we're doing, we're keen to see that number kind of progress, and that's why we're kind of looking at this year, trying to get out to the community and set some outreach programs up and focusing in terms of long-term conditions activities.
Okay, thank you. Second question was similar. Sorry. The second question was similar to Nick's question. You know, we're 5 years into a 15-year contract. I mean, looking at lots of data, and things are going in the right direction. A lot of investment, obviously, from the authority. So, be interesting to hear something. What is the? It's great in terms of the well-being of the residents, but interesting in terms of the at some stage to the financial benefits to the.
So we pay you to run your leisure authorities.
Yeah.
So we're in. There's financial information we can't disclose in a public forum. So things are going well. Obviously, COVID and the delays in the projects were probably things that no one counted for. So the 5 years, there's about 2.5 years of that there wasn't a great deal going on in terms of what was planned in that contract.
And the last question is that I know everyone active at other places, do you have any sort of independent reviews like Quest or any sort of to come in to actually sort of not say that this is wrong, but almost like a third party to sort of verify?
You've done your research very well. Grange Pallets will go through Quest in September. Last time, 2 years ago, they got excellent. Hartem will be doing that again later this year. Obviously with Crest, we want more information to provide them with the impact that we've got. So we want to get through that first 12 months of opening Hertford, and then that'll be the external accreditation of what we've got from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen.
Just in terms of social value for members' information, we agreed a social value policy last year or the year before. So the Everywhere Active contract was done before we had a formal social value policy in place. Now for all procurements, and particularly with the new waste contract coming online, we use the social value portal, and we use what they call their TOMs, themes, outcomes and measurements, and they have property values which they have researched on there. And the bidders will make their bids on the social value website, and the winning bidder will record their performance against that social value offer on the website. But obviously, the leisure contract was before we had that formal policy. Therefore, the social value that Everywhere Active are reporting, they're actually doing that voluntarily. It's not actually requirements of their contract, but it's really good to see that they're using, they're using a property values from a reputable source, because you pay your money, you take your choice as to which one source you want to monetize it, but they're using a reputable source, so I'm comfortable with that. But they are doing that, on top of what their contractual requirements are. And we can talk about finances on the leisure contract, but we'll obviously have to move into part 2 for the purposes of that. I'm quite happy to talk about them. I'm sure we could bore members together for a couple of hours on the finances.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So sorry, Councillor Deering.
Thank you very much for giving me a second bite of the cherry. I just wanted to say again, to pick up on the word Mark used, your presentation has been fantastically energetic. It's terrific to hear. Thank you very much indeed. But the other reason I've just asked to come back is because obviously in response to questions, you've told us that the financial performance is exceeding expectations. So I do just want to come back to all the effort that a number of my colleagues put in over many, many years to get Grange Paddocks and Harton going and improved as they have been. I'm going to embarrass Jeff. He will have spent hours and hours and hours. Jeff Williamson on this. Eric Buckmaster will have spent hours and hours and hours. Peter Boyden, Linda Hazy, Graham McAndrew. So it's just fantastic to see it's paid off. And thank you again very much to you and your team. We're really, really pleased. Thank you.
Thank you there, Bob. So on that note, the recommendation is that the views of the Audit and Governance Committee be received and noted, which I'm sure these will be minuted as well. And could I have a proposer and a seconder for this? Proposer, thank you, Councillor Deering. And seconder, Councillor Nichols, thank you very much. And if we could have a quick vote, those in favour, raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you very much. That's passed. So so Dan and Sarah, if you want to stay, feel free. If you want to escape, feel free as well. It's up to you. Thank you though. Thank you. So item 10. This is Tyrone. Thank you very much. The data protection update.
That's correct. Yes. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. For those of you who haven't met, my name is Tyrone Sudders, Information Governance and Data Protection Manager. I'm also the Council's Data Protection Officer. And the reason for bringing this report to you is just to provide you with an update on the number of reported breaches and subject access requests that I've received over the last reporting period, being from September 23 to April 24. So I'll start with the breaches. Over that period, we had 14 reported data breaches, one of which I made the decision to report to the Information Commissioner's Office because of the risk of the breach. That was due to a cyber attack suffered by one of our sub-processors used by Gatherwell, who provide the community lottery services. So sub-processor is essentially a supplier used by Gatherwell, so twice removed from us. As a data controller, we do have some responsibility. We have to ensure the security of our processors and ensure that they ensure the security of their sub-processors. So there is some responsibility there, which luckily Gatherwell did very well. They worked with the sub-processor to take some actions, which included rebuilding their database. They surveyed the the dark web for some time as well to see if the data sort of popped up there, and they were also successful in preventing that data being shared more widely, which is fantastic. So given those actions and that us as a data controller had ensured the security of our processor, the ICO was pleased and satisfied with our actions, and they took no further action against us, which is always great. Of the other 13 reported breaches, all of these were due to, no surprise, human error, the most common breach that we see. 9 were due to correspondence being shared incorrectly with recipients. 1 was due to not correctly using the BCC function, sending an email, quite an easy one to make. 2 were due to a calendar invite being sent to multiple attendees, because unfortunately when you use Outlook, you can't BCC, and everything you put on a calendar invite will be, of course, visible to all the recipients. So that's another one we had pop up. 1 was also due to data not being fully redacted before publication on the council's website. Those were all minor, low risk, so of course were not reported to the ICO. With the human error breaches, sort of divided up the actions into immediate actions that were taken. Some of them included where possible emails were recalled and they were successful, which is great. Incorrect recipients, wherever they received personal data, were all immediately contacted. Officers were quite proactive in that and asked to destroy personal data and also confirm by way of email that the personal data had been destroyed, so that we have record of that. Where there were any issues or errors due to software provided, we worked with the relevant supplier to, of course, ensure that the issue was flagged and was fixed, and obviously prevents any similar breaches occurring in future. The other sort of side of the actions were more proactive, so sort of more far-reaching actions, where emails were sent incorrectly by officers. Those officers were asked to regularly clear their autocomplete cache. So that's essentially what stores all of the email addresses. When you type in and working at quite a pace, loads of email addresses come up, you select the first one, and that's how easy the mistake is. Autocomplete cache clearing prevents that because it clears all the emails. So it's quite an effort to then put the email address in, but it can mean all the difference between a breach, a data breach, and a non-data breach. Of course, officers were always reminded of the serious implications of a data breach, and where relevant were advised of further actions. So if procedures or processes need to be changed, they were, and also they were given training depending on the type of breach, and that's particularly relevant wherever we see services reporting larger than usual numbers of breaches. I then go in to give that service a bit more hands-on training just to make sure that we can prevent any more human error breaches. We also activated a mail tip feature in Outlook, which is quite useful. So it's now possible that whenever you send an email to an external recipient from Outlook through any officer or member account, you should have what looks like an out of office pop down to say you are sending to an external recipient, which is just another step we put in place to hopefully stop people then sending that on. Also, officers were reminded of the importance to liaise with myself as data protection officer wherever we engage suppliers that use personal data, and that comes in with the breach suffered by the sub-processor of Gatherwell, so that I can work with officers to ensure that we have recorded their security arrangements and we're able to provide that if we're ever asked. So compared to the last data breach reporting period, there's been no increase. It's remained the same, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, because of course too little breaches are suspicious, but too much can also obviously be quite bad too. So we like to sort of keep a median. On the subject access request front, everything is fine there. We received 5 subject access requests. So that's of course requests for personal data. All requests were processed and responded to within the 1 calendar month statutory time limit. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Tyrone. Questions or comments? Councillor Nichols.
I just wondered if all the data breaches were in relation to officers and if any were relating to members at all.
No, this reporting period was just officers, luckily. There have been members previously, and of course we then follow the sort of same data breach procedure, advise them of actions to take to prevent that.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor Wilcox.
Just excuse me. So the subject access request, that's a freedom of information request, is it? Or
No, so freedom of information request is a request for sort of general information. Subject access request is made under the Data Protection Act and is purely just for people's personal data only. So it's a bit more stringent. Whenever we process a subject access request, we must have identification from the person to ensure that they're entitled to their personal data. It's normally a lot more, takes a lot more effort to deal with, because it can be quite broad. Most cases, people would just say, can you give me all personal data the council holds on me, which is quite a lot to trawl through. FOIs tend to be a bit smaller and are more for general information rather than personal data.
just one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The sub-processor, was that a fault of them adhering to our policy on sub-processors, or did our policy need to be updated afterwards to stop what happened?
No, so that was a fault in there. Unfortunately, there was a cyber attack. So a couple of months back, but yeah, it was a fault on their part, and that one of their security mechanisms fell down, and of course the attackers were able to infiltrate, which are then immediately rectified. But no, on our part, all we need to ensure is that security arrangements were in place in the first case, and then it's up to them to, of course, update it, and that we receive an update that security arrangement has been seen to. So
Thank you.
all on them, really.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, I have one question myself though. Is there anything relating to breaches which could financially cause us significant problems, given the state of obviously the council's finances, relating to fines and whatever?
Yes, so very good question. Breaches are probably, as you see in the news, of the sort of the area where the ICO will impose quite high fines. They'll depend on what we've had in place. It's very dependent on the breach and will be looked at on a case by case basis. They can vary from a couple of £100 to, if it's a very serious breach and includes things like sensitive data and it's quite obvious that the controller hasn't put enough measures in place, they can go up into the millions. I think it's capped at 14 million at the moment, at a higher tier fine, which has not been issued against any organization as long as I've been in post. The ICO is sort of moving to more of a, they will impose fines where they can, but they're sort of more into what can we do to help you ensure breaches like this don't occur in future. But yes, to answer your question, there are financial penalties, data breaches.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's no more questions or comments. I will just very quickly read out the recommendation that the committee notes the content of the report and provides any observations to the Information Governance and Data Protection Manager. So I'm after a proposer and a seconder. David Walcombe propose. Any seconders? Oh, Councillor Wilcox, yeah. So quick show of hands. Those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that is carried. Do you want to get off or you? Excellent. Thank you very much. So thank you. So Stephen, sorry it's taken the time. Monitoring of the 23-24 Q4 corporate risk register.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The corporate risk register is presented for members' information in the new and more succinct format. We will be, and in terms of development on these risks, we are currently working to replace our Pentana performance management system with Microsoft Viva Goals, which will be available in Teams so that members can look across our performance. Part of what we're doing on there is also a finance dashboard, which will have a number of pieces of financial information on there, like returns on treasury management, etc., etc. During the course of the quarter, our waste contractor Abasa, they contract out their maintenance on refuse vehicles to Geesink Norba. Geesink Norba went into administration. Unfortunately, Abasa activated their business continuity plan and had a new contractor in place with very, very quickly, and there was no effect on refuse and recycling collection, but there was a slight reduction in street cleansing vehicles being available, but overall it was very little minimal impact on that contract from the business continuity plan being activated. And I think that's about, we have also just finished decision-making accountability DMA review, field work from the LGA. We are awaiting the LGA report, which as I understand it is in draft with the Chief Executive. And we're waiting further on that then to move forward on the decision-making accountability and to look at the staffing structure, which will help deal with some of the staff and skills risks. Do any questions, Chairman?
Thank you very much, Stephen. Questions for Stephen? Oh, Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just an observation, really, or comment. The format of the risk report is something we've been tweaking and changing over the years. I think what officers have now produced is probably about the ultimate. I think it's a very clear table, and I do particularly like the sort of raw score, then the mitigated score, which shows really the true position of the risk. So I think, yeah, compliments to officers for the work done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more for any more? Because I've got one point, but Nick and Mark, all okay about that? So, Stephen, I suppose my comment really, and this is a sort of a leading question, some of the high impact or the high residual risk, so that's the technology and the finances. I was just wondering if you take the technology, for example, whether we are, whether it's worth digging deeper at a further meeting on that to get a response, maybe from the IT team.
Well, certainly, Chairman. I mean, part of your job is to make sure that we're managing risk effectively, and obviously, IT is outsourced to Stevenage Borough Council. There was some cyber security update which was given to the last committee, but obviously there was, after the election, there's a significant change in committee membership. So I'm sure the IT service would be more than happy to come in and talk about their cyber treatment plan and what they're doing to ensure cyber security on the network. So I don't see that being a problem. In terms of the financial stuff, where would you like to go, Chairman?
Well, I suppose we could talk about that on the next section, really, I suppose, and just go through what's on the programme. So, but thank you. So if there's, oh, sorry.
Sorry, really minor point. Just on the, I agree with the comment around the risk register and the format, and it's pitching that it feels like the right conversation, leads to the right conversation. So I think it's a great to get to this place. The likelihood and impact columns have seemed to have got around the wrong way, the letters and the numbers. So just in the formatting, I think impact is letters and likelihood is numbers. So that's just a very minor point.
Thank you, Nick. If there's no more questions or comments, I would say that the recommendations, the two recommendations, the 23-24 Q4 corporate risk register be reviewed and officers advised of any suggested improvements to the format of the risk register, which I think we've had a good feedback today. And the committee notes the risk register and actions being taken to control and mitigate the risk. So I'm after a proposer and a seconder for this. Councillor Nichols and Councillor Williamson. Thank you. So a quick vote, show of hands. Those in favour? Yes, unanimous. Thank you very much. That's carried. So the next point, the work programme. So Stephen.
Chairman, the work programme which we present to the committee, which we present the committee at every meeting. You will notice, Chairman, that at the moment there is no training topic in September, and there is no training topic in for May next year, and we invite members to say where they would like to go with training. We put suggested training on the statement of accounts when we anticipate the statement of accounts will be done, and also for treasury management, because we think it's important that members have treasury management annually. So where it basically invite members to have a training topic for the next meeting, the meeting in May, and if members have got any other changes to the work programme.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Questions and comments about the work programme. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. I apologise. I'm going to be sounding like a broken record on this. Looking through the programme, we've only got 4 meetings set for the civic year. And looking back, we've had 6 meetings here up until 2022, and there were 6 meetings last year, even though one was an extra one. We're down to 4, and I just wondered, is that in order to time reports with when they can capable of being delivered, or is there an opportunity of going back to perhaps 1 or 2 extra meetings in order to make each individual meeting a little bit more manageable? I know in particular we have in January we have the budget scrutiny, which is always an important item and should be given due time. So I mean, I can see the January meeting's already quite heavy with other things too.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Stephen, do you have a quick comment on that, or?
The meetings were programmed to fit with the accounts and audit regulations and the and when the expected outputs would be, which if members will recall, we were supposed to have draft accounts at the end of May, and then we were supposed to have audited accounts at the end of July. And therefore the meetings were timed around what that timetable would be. Since then, the external audit market for local authorities has gone to pot, using expression. So we're all over the place effectively. We're now in the situation of having EY, our old auditors, dealing with the 21-22 and 22-23 accounts. And then we've got ASET Audit Services, the new appointed auditor, dealing with the 23-24 accounts. Now, ASET say they will have a set of accounts ready for approval at the January meeting. Now, the backstop date was supposed to be November for them doing those accounts in this particular year, but because of the impact of what EY and other audit suppliers are doing in relation to those earlier accounts, and members will recall it is very likely that they will disclaim an opinion on the 22-23 accounts, which means that we are starting off then with ASET Audit Services not having a set of audit accounts from the year before, which we are starting to deal with because we are revaluing all the council's assets at the 31st of March 2023, which means that the 23-24 accounts are starting off with revalued assets, so they can remove the problem around the fixed assets accounting. But it's going to take a number of years to work through to get rid of that that disclaimer of opinion, but also because that's been pushed back by the backstop date the government has set. So the government has set that it will set the 30th of September as the backstop date to deal with all the accounts outstanding. So we will probably receive at the start of September a disclaimer of opinion from EY on 22-23. But because that backstop date is affected when ASETs can deliver their audit of the accounts for 23-24, because they can't really start until that September date is expired. That's why that's pushed that into January. So that's why January looks so chunky, because but that's when the meeting would be. And there's really nothing I could do about that, because you're going to have to do the budget scrutiny at that meeting, and you're going to have to approve the accounts, because you have to approve the accounts as soon as possible. We did have a subcommittee, but you took the subcommittee away because you thought it was important to do it at the meeting of the committee. So therefore, in accordance with your wishes, it's at the meeting of the committee.
Thank you, Stephen. Sorry, just a clarification. Are you talking about making the agenda smaller and deeper dive? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that was whether there's an opportunity to do so. I mean, I appreciate the situation with the external audit, and I think that would have gone to the July meeting when we had a July meeting. So I understand without that, perhaps there's no need for a July meeting. But whether there's an opportunity of having an extra meeting or two in order to lighten the load of each meeting. Some of them do seem very heavy. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but I was just wondering if there's an opportunity maybe for office to look to see whether that may be possible.
Okay.
Whether that works with the timetables.
Well, I think that's a clear action then, that we just look at that and we consider the implications of that. So thank you. Yes, Councillor Deering.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I promise you this isn't a concerted position, but listening to Jeff, I just thought I would add a voice to endorse what Jeff is saying. It does seem to me that at a minimum, we should look at maybe having a couple more meetings than are presently scheduled into the programme. This is quite an important committee, isn't it? It's a form of scrutiny. I think it's better that we are on the side of more meetings than fewer. Yeah. So just to endorse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. So any other questions, Councillor Walcombe?
Thank you, Chair. On January the 18th, we had a full council meeting at which the sole subject of discussion was the Hertford Theatre. And I noticed that in the work programme for this year, we do not have an audit session on the finances of the Hertford Theatre. And my question is there going to be one? And a supplementary question to that, I remember Councillor Clements and myself and Councillor Dumont asking for a site of the business plan for the Hertford Theatre, which presumably would have KPIs that we could judge the performance of the Hertford Theatre against. We never saw that business plan, and in a future training or preparation, if we're going to do the job properly as an audit and governance committee, I do feel that we should be fully aware of the implications of the finances of the Hertford Theatre, and wonder what steps officers will take to apprise us of what's going on that project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that something, Stephen, you could answer or not?
Chairman, the intention was always to bring a theatre annual report like the leisure annual report. So because it's a major project in which the council has invested significant capital resources, it was always intended that on your May meeting you would have a report from Hertford Theatre on what it was doing against its KPIs. The leadership team are currently working with the theatre management team to come up with a set of comprehensive PIs around its financial performance, but also about its audience outreach, etc. So that we can understand, so we can have a rounded, balanced scorecard on that. So the intention was always to bring it to Audit and Governance Committee. I do note I haven't put it in on May 2025, so I'll be more than happy to put it in May 2025. You'll receive an annual report on the theatre to date. I mean, obviously it will open in August, towards the end of August is the target opening date of the theatre, so it will be not a full year at all. And obviously starting it up, and the studio theatre still will not open on that particular day, on the particular August opening date. That will open later when the fitting out's completed. There won't be a full year of operation, but it was always part of the undertaking that the theatre would report annually, just in the same way that Everywhere Active has reported here on the investments in Grange, Paddocks and Hartham. So I'll correct that error on my part. I apologise, Chairman. I should have picked that up.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Is that okay? Any more questions? Because I have a point to raise on relating to the training. Oh, sorry, Nick.
That's right. Just in terms of the September meeting, I see there's a data protection update. I wonder whether we had a data protection update today, and I'm not sure how regularly that's due. It's 2 or 3 times seems to be during the forward look, but I know there was some comment about the committee previously asking for that, so don't want to not have that. But I thought the update today was really good. It aligns really well with the risk, shows the risk is being really well mitigated and controlled, and the current risk, likelihood and impact was a lower score. So felt that may be an area we didn't need to spend so much time on. I would agree with your comment earlier around the technology and IT, because that is the risk, which is still high scoring, and mitigation and just getting a bit of understanding. So whether we could in September replace the data protection update with a update on the technology IT side and align that to the strategic risk that we spoke about earlier. I think that would be really helpful.
That's a good point. Thank you, Nick. Stephen, do you have any?
So just be clear, Chairman, how many times a year do you want a data protection update?
This is an interesting one.
Because we previously told you wanted an update at every meeting, which is why you have an update at every meeting. So I'm just wanting to count, because do you want no update? Do you want it a quarter? Do you want it every other meeting? Do you want it once a year?
So is this the normal thing to discuss at these meetings? So does anyone have a view on whether we should have them every meeting, or maybe have in this instance have a swap out? Any view? Councillor Williamson.
I would suggest twice a year, please.
Okay, thank you. Any other views?
I think if we could have a quarterly report, I'm not sure we need 6 meetings a year, but if we could have a quarterly report of just a written report of how many data breaches happened in that quarter, I don't think we need to bring poor Tyrone in every time, but I think we need at least one report a year from him for each year. But a written report every quarter would be a useful measure to keep us aware of what's going on.
Okay, thank you. It's good for you.
Yeah,
Sorry, Councillor Nichols, actually, yeah.
Do we have just some discussion before about receiving reports as read and not having a report during the meeting? I can't remember what sort of terminology you use for it, but yeah,
Cool.
that would be an idea.
Okay, and Councillor Wilcox?
I was actually just completely agreeing here, twice a year with a report, a sort of summary report, the meeting that we can just agree to call over.
Okay, yes, well, there's the general consensus then is that we will reduce down the amount of instances where we discuss or have itemized data breaches. I mean, 2 times a year for me is fine. I think that it'd be good, obviously, that we could change it if something changes. So if there's an uptick or something like that. So if we go for twice a year, can we vote on that? I'm not precious about it, but just to get a consensus. So those in favour of twice a year? Okay, then that is that, would that be normal, Michelle?
It's just for noting,
Hmm.
but you don't yeah.
Can I just say, Chairman, you have a report from Tyrone at every meeting, but this is the first time that Tyrone's come in about a year to the meeting. So are you talking about continuing with that and him only coming once a year physically to the meeting, but continuing these 4 reports? Or are you talking about reducing down to 2 reports a year?
So my impression was 2 times a year. So yes, yes. So that's carried. Thank you very much. Just on the note, those for the September meetings. So we could replace the current slot with a update from IT around obviously the risks and whatever, the stability of the system. But also one of the discussions that I had with the independents was about inquiring about the transformation program and whether that is actually going to be sensitive or whether the budget is going to be sensitive to the success of the transformation program and whether we should get a discussion going and getting a presentation. And I don't know your views on that, but the training session for September could be used for an update on the transformation program. So what, any views on that? Councillor Nichols?
I think that's a good idea.
Any other view?
I think it's an excellent idea.
Can you remind us what the transformation program?
So it's Helen's brief to transform the council. So it's probably a mixture of things here, but there will be a financial benefit to the transformation. So that question, fine. I think it's a very good question that we could ask her if we request her attendance. So can we have a vote on that then, if possible? So those in favour of changing out the training slot for the September meeting for a discussion with Helen relating to the transformation programme. Those in favour, raise your hands. That's 5 against. Abstain. And
Sorry, Chairman. I mean, we do have all member briefings on the transformation programme quite regularly. I'm just trying to think through whether the transformation programme is a suitable subject for this committee. What would we actually be asking officers to prepare and produce for such a scrutiny, if I can put it like that. I think that's the question going through my mind. That's why I hadn't quite got to an answer when you called for the vote.
Well, given the fact that I suppose good question. It's really about the risk to the general running or the budget of the council, and whether that risk is something that we should be concerned with as part of either the risk register or whatever, but to understand more.
Yeah, I'm happy to add my vote for then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So, sorry, Councillor Nichols, did you want to say anything? Okay, sorry. So Councillor Deering.
Yeah, sorry, I might be interrupting your flow, but I'm just not quite sure where we've got to on the number of meetings a year point, which does strike me, the more I think about it, as actually quite an important point. And I would be, as I said before, the more I think about it, the more I'm positively supportive that we have more than 4 meetings a year. 6 seems a decent number to me. I'm just not quite sure where we've got to.
No, you raise a good point. No, we haven't resolved that. So, Stephen, what are the implications of having 6 meetings? So not necessarily to alter the schedule, but to actually have a greater frequency.
I'm afraid, Chairman, I can't answer you. I'll have to ask the monitoring officer, the head of legal democratic services, because it's within his purview that meetings are arranged and democratic services resources are available to them. So I'm afraid I can't answer you, Chairman. I'd have to refer it to James and ask James to answer you, because I simply can't.
That's no problem. Fair comment. So the suggestion, well, there's obviously an action to take away. So I suggest the next meeting, which will be September, we will address this particular point. 6 meetings or 4 meetings. You okay? Any questions?
Sort of looking at me because I've ended up making a bit of a fuss about it. I mean, given what Stephen said, I think we have to be, don't we? But to make another obvious point, there's quite a big interval of time between now and September.
Certainly. So I don't know whether, Michelle, do you know whether this could be brought forward or we can get a response to fit in a meeting prior to September?
I very much doubt that there's going to be a meeting before September. Obviously, it will be a conversation that myself and Stephen will have to have with James and Katie as soon as possible. I don't know what the answer is to the question, unfortunately, until I've gone down that avenue.
No, that's fair comment. So could I just take a view then on whether we are thinking about 6 meetings a year, whether just any views on that? So Councillor Williamson.
I wish I'd never started this now. I think the question probably goes before this. I raised the principle of whether 4 meetings can be made 6 meetings in order to lighten the load of each meeting. That was a general principle. But I do accept that a lot of reports are strictly timed as to when they can be delivered. And therefore, we might end up putting a meeting in and there's actually nothing that can be brought to us at that time, if that makes sense. So I suppose the first question is it possible for the timetable to be rejigged to allow more meetings, or does that not actually work for when officers can bring items to us? That was the point I was originally trying to make, I suppose. I mean, if that's not possible, then the timetable is what it is. I'm going to have to live with it. And if indeed it's awkward to get dates in now for this coming civic year, perhaps it's something we can think about from next civic year onwards. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to agree whether we want 4 meetings, 5 meetings or 6 meetings, really, so we can understand what can be brought to us and when, and whether it actually works to try and recreate the timetable in that way. And I think only really perhaps the officers can come back to us with advice.
Certainly. Thank you, Jeffrey. Councillor Walcombe.
Could I propose, Mr. Chairman, that you raise the question with the Democratic Services in partnership with Steve and Michelle, so that you can bring back to us as a committee, you can express our feelings about this and explore the possibilities, because I do accept what Councillor Williamson is saying, that crowded agendas like tonight's are not always optimal. So if it's possible, if it makes sense, 5, 6 meetings a year, fine. But quarterly meetings seem to me to be perfectly okay too. So it's a judgment call, which, as both Steve and Michelle have said, is a decision for Legal and Democratic Services to make. But I would like you to be a part of that decision if the rest of the committee would agree on that.
Okay, and any views on that? Councillor Hart?
I mean, to some degree, I have to support what Jeff is saying, because it is very difficult to properly scrutinise the reports as they come through, because they're very long and very dense and very technical. And if there's a lot of them one after the other, you know, it is hard to do. It would be better if they were more spread out. And I think some of the reports could be more spread out. Like, for instance, the data protection report is one, for example. And it's kind of determining which reports could come to us in a so you have more time. Like the risk register, I would have liked to have a lot more time to look at that and discuss it in much more detail. But it's late in the day and everybody's tired, so it's hard to really give it the full attention it really does deserve. So if it is possible, I do think we should do that, so we can maybe even one whole session is just dedicated to one of these very big reports.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other views? Okay, so I think the proposed action really is that I would be more involved with the discussion with yourself, Michelle, and Democratic Services and Stephen. Thank you. So just moving on then, thank you very much for that. So the recommendation is to approve the work programme, and we've voted on 2 additional items. We also had an action relating to 4 or 6, how we flex that or how we deal with that. So approve the works programme as set out in the report. So we can do that now, but clearly there may be changes afoot anyway. And to specify any training requirements. And I don't know whether anyone's got any views on that, but I think that if there's no further questions or whatever. Sorry,
Chairman, you said you wanted the IT service to come and do a presentation on cybersecurity, which they would probably have to ask the committee to move into part 2 session for, to exclude the press and the public, because obviously we don't want to tell the world what our cybersecurity systems are. So just to make members aware that that will probably happen as part of that meeting. So, and which meeting do members want that, so I can arrange that with the IT service?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. So that was booked for the September meeting.
Chairman, you asked for Transforming East Hearts to come to the September meeting. So when do you want the IT crew to come?
So I was under the impression that we were talking about removing the data breaches for September.
So just to be clear, you want Transforming East Hearts and cybersecurity presentations at the September meeting. Okay.
You think it's a pact?
Meeting.
Right. Okay. So,
well, Chairman, if you're going to have 30 minutes of Transforming East Hearts followed by 30 minutes of cybersecurity.
Well, we'll have to think about the timing on that. Yeah. Okay, Steve. Thank you. Well, this would be an interesting exercise. So we're after a proposer and a seconder to these recommendations. So any proposer? Councillor Walcombe, and seconder, Councillor Hart. So can we vote on this? Those in favour? Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. So on that note, we are now at the urgent items. Do we have any urgent items? No. Thank you very much. So I declare this meeting closed at 9:24. So thank you very much, folks. It's been a good meeting. Thank you.